Welcome in to the Three Wings FPL Podcast Network. I am Luke here, Bluff FPL, doing a solo video for the first time, but just going to talk through my free hit draft as I try to finalize it ahead of the deadline that's coming up for us in the US tomorrow morning. The UK folks, obviously a little later in the day. First, just want to kind of talk generally about the free hit and why it sucks and why I'm in this position, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend other people. If you're on the fence about free hitting this week, I know, my co-host, Vibes FC, is free hitting this week. I honestly wouldn't recommend it. Let's start with why I'm doing it. I'm in this position because currently my team, I have no Liverpool, I have Haaland and no Salah. I have one Crystal Palace and I have two Forest. So looking at the team, on paper, it doesn't look awful. It's a team that can get by for the week. But considering what I'm missing out on in some of those amazing fixtures, Newcastle, Liverpool, Crystal Palace, Tottenham, stuff like that, it just made too much sense. This was my initial plan always going into the season, knowing that I was going without someone like Mohamed Salah. The idea was just that I couldn't pass up a week like this. So with that being said, I'm obviously planning this, have been planning this, brought in Forest assets, got rid of Liverpool assets for this purpose. But let's talk through why I wouldn't recommend other people do it. First point on that is just general injuries. Palace, who is one of the fixtures that you'd almost certainly attack this week, you're missing out on Wharton, Sarr, and obviously a little bit delayed, but Eze as well. I just don't love the idea of how that midfield progresses now and how you get balls in the net against Sunderland. It really does worry me quite a bit about Crystal Palace's prospects as a whole going into the weekend. That being said, considering I'm on free hit, I think I just have to kind of invest in Palace and hope for the best. But it does concern me of how are they going to score without some of those really key players. That being said, we've seen Glasner do a great job with Palace. They're coached really well. They play really well. Just something of note. Another one that we found out about this morning being Vissa. Having no Vissa is wild. It wasn't someone who I was going to go with just because he was a minutes risk, but that's just another attacking option that you wouldn't have. And another one is Palmer. And maybe he would never have gone into your thinking with regards to the free hit, but playing against Brentford, if he was fully fit, he'd be a potential captaincy option this week. So just I think a lot of the upside of this week is capped a little bit by some of those injuries. There's, I'm sure, more that are unlisted. Those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Second point is Nottingham Forest and just the uncertainty that comes with a coaching change in that group. I think it's tricky for a couple of reasons. All of the reasons why I wouldn't free hit also apply to why I wouldn't wildcard. Say you're wildcarding right now. Who the hell knows what Nottingham Forest is going to do? Who knows what they're going to look like in this new system under Ange? Are they going to be more attacking? Are they going to be worse defensively? Is it going to be a little bit more of the same? Has Ange learned from past experiences at all? All of that is up in the air. We don't even know who's in favor, but it's a tough time to have wildcarded into those guys because they have the best fixtures over the next two games after this. You could potentially be bringing in someone for Arsenal that then has great fixtures, or you could be skipping out on players who have great fixtures in 5 and 6. Like I said, I have two Forest players. My plan is to hold them through that period. It's Chris Wood and Murillo. I'm not hyped about the coaching change, but we're just going to ride with it. Another one is that this free hit comes after the international break. And there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with that with regards to minutes. You have a lot of players coming from South America, players like João Pedro and Richarlison, who look like great attacking options going into this week on paper. You just don't know how many minutes they're going to play. Even teams like Liverpool, where guys have gone and played, like Florian Wirtz has played 90 minutes in both games. I think Gakpo went and played 90 minutes in both his international games. Just there's so much uncertainty there of what injuries are guys carrying that they played through and potentially we never saw anything of. Where do managers just decide a player needs a rest? We obviously heard about that this morning with João Pedro and potentially being a doubt, but it's definitely an annoying time to be trying to pick players who are going to go off this week. Additionally, we're right post-transfer window. So you have players like Isak and as well we haven't seen a full strength Liverpool. Even if Isak hadn't showed up, we still haven't seen what they look like when they have players like Bradley, Frimpong, Szoboszlai, McAllister, all of these guys fit, and they suddenly don't have enough spots on the field for all of those guys to be there. Then you add in the Isak problem, and it's a real headache. So you've got Vissa and Voltamad. You're just trying to see how they're going to fit in with Newcastle, how they're going to gel, how many minutes those guys going to have. Xavi at Tottenham, and then as well as just the Tottenham number 9. And a Thomas Frank number 9 is someone that, in theory, you'd like to target. But right now, like I said, with Richarlison, doubtful minutes potentially. They have some other options to potentially play in that position. It's an interesting one. Truthfully, for me, Richarlison coming into this week was someone who really was at the forefront of my thinking. No Solanke, potentially nailed on minutes for that Frank number 9 role against West Ham, who I believe are poor defensively, and that, last week was a good showing out of them, but I think they'll regress more to being a porous side that's going to give up a lot of goals. But ultimately, the reason I'm not going with someone like Richarlison in my free hit draft, as you guys will see, is because all of the content creators who I follow who are Tottenham fans and have an implicit knowledge of their team have not brought him in. So that tells me something. We also have our own Tottenham fan in our Three Winks group, FPL Mac, and he specifically advised me against going for Richarlison just because of the competition for minutes up there with Kolomani, if I'm saying that right, who came in and could potentially take minutes off of him, as well as obviously coming from South America and having played minutes for Brazil. It just seems like he's a little bit of a risk. And Solio confirms that with 64 projected minutes. João Pedro, FYI, is 73 projected minutes as of now. And then the final reason why free hit sucks right now is that it's early season. We just don't have enough data. We don't have enough information to figure out what teams are good and what players are good. Some examples being Gyökeres, who's going to be a really popular pick this week, who I am not sold on, and Wirtz, who I'm also not sold on. I sold him out of my FPL team after game week 2. Both of those guys, are they going to find form? Are they going to get used to the Premier League? Are they going to become established players for their teams that consistently return? And then on a team perspective, which versions of Nottingham Forest and West Ham are going to show up? I have my own inklings, but still, it's been only 3 weeks. Are West Ham the team that's going to ship 5 like they did with Chelsea, or are they the team that's going to, score 3 and keep a clean sheet against Forest? It's really unclear. Anyway, with all that being said, if you find yourself in a position like myself where you have to free hit, or where you just like the upside and want to go for it this week, hey, power to you. Let's talk through how I built my draft, and I'll walk through the picks after this. So if you had a chance to view our earlier video this week where myself and FPL Vibes FC, also known as Sharp, went through our drafts, then you'll have seen this. So I'm not going to touch on it too much, but I think if you're building a free hit draft, because you have so much you can do, you have to think about what are your priorities. For me, the non-negotiable is Salah. I don't understand why you'd go without him this week. Yes, he has looked less involved in the Liverpool attack, and I've backed against him in my team, but I think that one is he's the obvious captaincy option, and there's nothing to that. Triple Liverpool, I think, is also a must. Just it's such a mismatch on paper between these two teams, and you want to take full advantage of that. Munoz, I think, just a defender with that much attacking threat against a promoted side. I love it. I love the potential for clean sheets with this Palace defense that's looked really stout, and how aggressive he is, potentially the most attacking defender in the game right now. So absolutely had to be in there for me, and I think he was, like my 3rd pick. Nick Pope, reason I like him is just I think he has the best defensive fixture on paper. I've thought that despite what the data says from the jump, that I just think Newcastle defensively are so solid and Wolves have looked so bad. That's further confirmed today with hearing that Strand Larsen's going to be out. I think the data is starting to reflect that. Haaland, and this one, I know a lot of people will say, hey, if you put in Haaland, you're taking too much out of your draft. I'll talk through that a little more when we get to it, but I just can't get rid of him. I have him in my actual team, and he's generated so many chances. He has actually underperformed his expectations so far, and he just looks phenomenal. And he's playing against a United side that lost to Grimsby. I'm not going to keep that against them too much, considering the field or the team that they fielded, and then let Burnley score 2 goals against them. So I think Haaland is a must. Pedro Porro, I actually have not been able to fit into my side, and I've cooled on quite a bit since creating this graphic. And then Palace defense. I think you just need to have at least two of those guys going into a game where they have looked so strong defensively and they're playing a promoted side. Don't overthink it. I want to briefly talk through the Solio projections for goals and clean sheets. These I screenshotted just before getting on here, so they should be very up-to-date post press conferences, and it looks like they did change quite a bit after that time. Unsurprisingly, Liverpool is tops. Arsenal being second all week has kind of surprised me. I know that Arsenal are a top side, and Forest haven't looked good defensively for some time now, and their underlying metrics support that. But I'm not sold on Arsenal's attack. I think a defense-first team needs to prove to me that they can be this ultra-attacking side before I buy that. And I'm not sure that that's going to come against Forest. The Ange thing is a huge uncertainty that's been thrown into that, but I'm just not sold on it. Newcastle, again, I think Wolves have looked bad on both sides of the ball, so I'm for this. I don't see them winning this game like 5-0, but I could see 3. So I think that's 2 or 3. I think that's a worthy call out. Like I touched on Man City, I think almost all that's coming from Haaland. Shout out if you have Reinders. I do in my normal team, and I think he could be a really nice pick this week. Chelsea, Spurs, Palace, Fulham. Spurs I like to see up here. They initially were projected a little lower and have since gone up. Again, I think that they're going to do really well against West Ham. My only concern is how well Bournemouth were able to stop their attack just by forcing them to go to the left. So we're going to see how Thomas Frank handles that and adjusts in a new game. But I would push for them to adapt against a team like West Ham. Crystal Palace. As I touched on, I really struggle with figuring out how this team is going to progress the ball without such a key player in Wharton and without some of their best attacking threats in Eze and Sarr. I'm just not sold on them attacking. So let's jump to the clean sheets really quick. This has shifted quite a bit, actually. The clean sheet odds were by quite a wide margin, Liverpool and Arsenal for a while, and then the rest of these were a lot lower down. But again, I think some of the press conference news and players like Strand Larson being out, as well as a lot of the guys from Leeds being out, have upped the clean sheet odds for Newcastle and Fulham. I'm a little shocked to see that Liverpool's dropped as much as they did, but I think overall this is really reflective of how I feel going into this week, that these are all pretty much very high clean sheet odds. 45%, 47% is really high. Basically a 50-50 of a clean sheet. So this is why I think it's very viable this week to go big at the back and to potentially have 4 or 5 at your back, which is crazy to say on a free hit. What a world we live in. I don't even think that's because of DEFCONs, but I don't think DEFCONs hurt that. Fulham is another one that I think really could do some damage this week on both sides of the ball. It looks like Leeds is kind of limping into this game. So that's stuff to think about and keep in mind as we go through this free hit draft. So let me bring in a couple of these. So first I'm going to show the free hit draft that I had as of yesterday. I'm going to talk through kind of how I built this from the ground up, and then it'll make a little bit more sense as to how I arrived here, because 5-2-3 sure as shit wasn't in my thinking when I first started planning a free hit. And a lot of these players have changed since I initially planned it. So this was as of yesterday. This is not my current draft. I will jump to that next. Like I said, Nick Pope in goal. Daniel Munoz is an absolute lock for me. Triple Liverpool and Salah cap. Absolute lock, as well as Haaland. So that kind of puts you in quite a bucket, right? You already are starting in such a tough spot from a funds perspective and a budget perspective. So first off, Salah, no questions there. I don't think there's anything to be said about it. I have been nervous watching Liverpool's defense, and I don't think that means they concede against Burnley, and I still rate them really highly as a team, and would not be shocked to see them keep a clean sheet. So there's no hate on that for me not having a Liverpool defensive asset, notably Van Dijk. And I do think he's the most secure for minutes. I think you could also bring in Alisson for 5-5 and have another secure player in a likely clean sheet. I'm not 100% confident in their defense, one, but more than anything, the reason that I have 3 Liverpool attackers is because they just look so good in attack. And I think this game has goals written all over it. So again, the data does support that. Liverpool is by far and away the highest attacking odds going into the week, projected to score 2.45 goals. I bet you they'll beat that. I'd take the over. So I went with Salah, Gakpo, and Ekitike, 3 guys who I think are the most nailed for minutes. I think you could argue it's Wirtz. I could see Wirtz dropping out of this lineup, funny enough, going into this weekend. He seems like he's been carrying some, maybe not injuries, but just isn't fully fit. And we saw him play 2 90-minute games for Germany over the break. Notably, Gakpo did as well. But I am also just not trying to figure out when Wirtz is going to return and bet on that. I'd much rather bet on a player like Gakpo. Ekitike, I'm pretty confident that Isak won't start. In the press conference today with Slot, reaffirmed that. And I'm willing to take, if it's 70 minutes of Ekitike, that kind of sucks, but I'm still willing to take that against Burnley. I am just that confident in this Liverpool attack at absolutely dismantling these guys. I mean, Tottenham put up 3 on them, and I love this fixture from an attacking perspective for Liverpool, and I also love the idea of just going all out with this. I'm calling this draft the triple, right? The triple. You've got Salah, Gakpo, and Ekitike, triple Liverpool attack, triple Newcastle defense, and triple Crystal Palace defense. So Haaland, like I said, all the reasons that I said, not going to jump into that one too much. The reason I have both Chris Richards and Mark Gahey here is just their value for 4-5. Both of those guys are such good value. I know it says I'm short funds on Soleo here, but I can't actually make this draft I went with the free hit early and caught some price changes, but 4.5 for those guys is great value. They have incredibly high clean sheet odds, as we saw before, 45% for those guys, and they're so cheap. When you think of your Van Dijks and your Gabriels and all those guys, it's difficult to find better value. Similarly, I feel that way about the Newcastle defense. Nick Pope, like I said, the reason he's locked in my team is not necessarily because he's the best keeper, but because he's the best 5-0 keeper. You could argue that Leno may be an option, but I think, again, just seeing Wolves and having watched a lot of their games as an RAS owner, it's not looking good. So similarly, I'm looking to invest in Schär and Burn, and I'm not convinced on that, and you'll see that in the next draft. So this is the first option. I went with João Pedro over someone like a Mateta because I'm just worried about Crystal Palace's attacking threat. I like João Pedro. We're all good to go there. But this morning, we obviously heard that João Pedro might be a minutes doubt. Soleo has him projected at 73 minutes. That could be about right. It sounds like it's likely he starts, but the manager noting that, hey, he just came back from South America, and that's a concern for me, says that he's not going to play the full game, and he's probably going to get tugged whenever they can, as early as is humanly possible. So I don't love a player like that on a free hit, and it's not like he has the absolute best fixture. I don't think Brentford are the target team that we thought they were after week 1 with Nottingham Forest. I think they're a decent team with a decent defense. They're not going to, they're someone to mildly target, but it's not plum. So I started really thinking about what are the opportunities that we can take if I remove João Pedro from this draft. Again, never thought I would have a 5-3-2, but if I pull out João Pedro, part of the reason I went with Haaland that I haven't touched on is that, some might say that bringing him in restricts your funds in other players and you have to make sacrifices at other positions. And that's certainly true, but I don't really believe in a lot of the high-priced mids and forwards this week, outside of obviously the ones that are shown here. João Pedro, the minutes risk, Mateta for the reasons already shared, Gyökeres because I just don't want to, similar with Wirtz, I don't want to time when Gyökeres is going to figure it out. I don't believe I've touched on him too much yet, but watching him, I'm just uninspired. And again, I don't see Arsenal as an attack first team. I see them as a defense first team. I would be more inclined to go with someone like an Eze or Madueke going into this game. And I just don't think Forest are the best team to target. I could be wrong. Arsenal could score 5 and Gyökeres could have 3 and I'll be, kicking myself. But I can't get over the gut feeling that he's not all that and that he's certainly not worth the funds this week. So with that being said, I felt like I could invest my money in someone like Haaland. not go for someone like a Semenyo, who I also think is a little overhyped early on in the season, and instead go for somebody a little bit cheaper who is still playing a bad side, and that's Harvey Barnes. Obviously, there's some minutes concerns considering he didn't start last week, which was really odd, but I do, all indications say that he should come back into the side. He has no competition with Anthony Gordon being out, so I like that. Obviously, though, that means I have to pull one of my Newcastle defenders. I wasn't feeling great about having no Arsenal exposure going into this week. Like I said, I'm more comfortable with fading their attacking assets, but defensively, I think it's pretty likely they keep a clean sheet unless Ange just says, "Hey, we don't care if we lose 5-2. I want you guys to go all out attack." If that's the case, then hey, I'd still back Arsenal. They're the best defense in the league, and I think they're going to have answers. Who knows? We could see what happens. I could be wrong on that, but I think point being, essentially downgrading from João Pedro directly to Barnes gives me the money to upgrade up to a 6.0 defender. I may look at a couple of other players here. I don't think this draft is fully locked. I'm really close to this being locked, but there are a few options that I'm thinking about bringing in. Gabriel, I think you could be Cucurella. Looking back at those clean sheet odds, Chelsea's aren't quite as high as Arsenal's and are actually quite a bit lower, but I also think that Cucurella has so much more attacking threat than Gabriel, and I don't think that I looked at some of the corners and what teams were giving up the most chances, and Nottingham Forest is not one of those. That could be because of their schedule, but it's 3 games, small sample size. However, I just don't know if this is the game where Gabriel scores a corner header. I don't think he's going to be good for DEFCONs. I don't think he's going to be good for anything but a clean sheet. So you're really paying $6 million for a clean sheet, but it's a really guaranteed clean sheet. On the opposite end, Chelsea are obviously a team where they have a little bit, still quite a good defensive record, and Cucurella just gets into the box. So that's a temptation. Same kind of idea with Pedro Porro from Spurs, but I am worried about Spurs potentially having a dud this weekend. So it's all tricky. I think there's certainly some options of where you could add that João Pedro money. I'm still not fully decided on Barnes. I'm leaning towards him as opposed to like a Madueke or an Eze, just because he is a little bit cheaper and I can then upgrade the defense. I think there are the other option that I'm thinking about at 4-5 as opposed to potentially one of these Crystal Palace defenders, if I didn't want to bet 3 times on the Crystal Palace defense, is going with someone like an Anderson. I was initially somewhat uninspired with him, but seeing how dilapidated Leeds' lineup looks, I think that clean sheet is probably higher odds than this even gives it, but these have gone up quite a bit for that team throughout the week. So I'm thinking about it. He has some attacking threat. I watched his highlights again to see kind of where he's getting at. Most of his threats are from corners. Could they feast potentially? So that's a thought process. Gabriel could go to another 6-0 or a 6-1, and Harvey Barnes can go elsewhere. But I think otherwise I'm pretty locked here. Only other conversation I was having with Sharp at FPL Vibes FC was talking through, is Cher actually the best Newcastle defender? He's 5'5", whereas you have Burn and Livramento for 5'0" and 5'1" respectively. Those are some good options as well, potentially. I think Cher, the extra adage is that it's always almost a joke, but he could be on penalties. So he has a little bit more attacking threat in that sense. But I just think, a nailed center back, I like it. I'm also not 100% positive Livramento starts, although I think it's likely. So this is where I'm at right now. Again, could slightly change, but the core of this team is not changing unless something else comes out. But post press conferences, I don't anticipate that. So again, the 3 Liverpool guys, three attackers, Salah, Gakpo, Ekitike, no questions. Munoz and Pope are locked. Haaland is locked. I think this defense is pretty locked, considering I'll definitely be going at least double Palace defense. So that's the option there. And then it's just kind of playing around with the fringes a little bit. So that is my thought process going into this free hit. I feel good about this team. I think just touching on the 5 at the back, if you're still sitting here being like, what the fuck is he doing? Look at these clean sheet odds. I mean, 47%, 45%. You're not going to see another week like this for a long time. It's weird. I don't like it. In my ideal world, a free hit draft is as few defenders as I can and going for all the attacking upside. I just don't see it this week. Again, I feel like I planned for this free hit, yes, but some of the injuries and concerns have backed me a little bit into a corner. There's not that many attacking options. I just don't like a lot of them. A lot of people are going Gyökeres. I don't feel it. If you're going there, no worries. Power to you. But yeah, this is where I've landed. I feel pretty good about it. 5 at the back, though. Holy shit. Anyway, that is all. We will be back with our Game Week 4 review next week. Mac should be back from his vacation. So the three of us will talk through that. And if Sharp and I end up on this free hit journey together and something fails, if Palace somehow don't keep the clean or Newcastle doesn't keep the clean, I'll be showing up in tears, and he might as well. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Appreciate it.